And see you next time, folks. Thanks very much for watching. Bye-bye.
Share the magic that legends are made of in a family classic, Disney's The Sword in the Stone.
Tonight at 7 on Channel 9. This is Chicago's Midday News.
Good afternoon, I'm Steve Sanders. Coming up with the Midday News, a numbing sense of grief and shock prevailed this afternoon in Killeen, Texas, as the town tries to recover from a massacre. Chicago animal rights activists are taking on the nation's meat packers. So far, at least one winner in the Illinois Lotto's near-record jackpot, and the nation mourns the loss of singer Tennessee Ernie Ford. All those stories straight ahead right now. Here's Tom Skilling with a look at Chicago area weather.
That's right, Steve. We have a beautiful day going in Chicago. We'll burst into the mid-70s, but look for much cooler air to come in as we head toward the weekend. That plus our long-range outlook and a look at a big rain on the East Coast coming up. Here's Steve with the news.
Thank you, Tom. Residents of Killeen, Texas this afternoon are in a state of shock after a suicide gunman killed 22 people. Charles Zewe is live in Killeen with more on the nation's worst mass shooting.
Now begun at the shattered Luby's cafeteria here in Killeen, Texas. Police have now positively identified 19 of the 22 shooting victims, and they say they confront a deadly jigsaw puzzle. Flags flew at half-staff in Killeen as the Central Texas city mourned victims of gunman George Hennard. Police say they don't yet know why the 35-year-old unemployed merchant marine with a supposed history of hating women shot up a Luby's cafeteria at lunchtime yesterday, killing 22 people and wounding 20 others before committing suicide. Killeen Police Chief F.L. Giacomozo told a news conference Hennard used 2 automatic pistols in his deadly rampage, but the chief said he has no idea why.
We're still in the ongoing process of trying to identify bits and pieces of information, trying to piece them together so we can profile the individual and try to figure out why it happened in Killeen, and why it happened at Luby's. We may never know the answers, and we may be able to find.
Investigators worked through the night at the shattered cafeteria collecting evidence. Police disclosed that 2 survivors escaped injury, one by hiding in a restaurant cooler, and the other, identified as busboy Mark Matthews, spent the night inside a commercial dishwasher. Matthews was led from the restaurant at early morning and was said to be in good shape. The restaurant chain, meanwhile, announced it has set up a $100,000 trust fund for victims. Luby's president, Pete Urban's voice cracked with emotion as he told reporters the chain would do all it could for victims and their families.
In the face of such mindless violence, I can only add my own sense of personal grief and my absolute assurance that we are making every effort to help the victims and their families.
Urban said no decision has been made on whether to close the restaurant. Luby's workers were called in for counseling. Many of them are emotionally shattered by the experience.
By the grace of God, I made it out of there. I just knew any time a bullet was going to hit me.
Most say their lives are forever changed. Police say Hennard had a minor arrest record for a narcotics violation, marijuana, in El Paso years ago. They say they have found 2 unspecified pieces of potential evidence at his home in nearby Belton, but they're not saying what that might be. This is Charles Zewe reporting live from Killeen, Texas.
In France, at least 16 people are dead after a train collision outside of Paris. It happened early this morning. A freight train and a passenger train collided head-on near a Paris suburb. All 8 cars of the passenger train derailed. At least 16 people were killed, 90 others injured. Officials think the freight train may have ignored a red light, triggering the accident. More than a dozen people are recovering from minor injuries today after the wings of 2 airplanes brushed together at Newark Airport. It happened last night. A Continental Airlines 737 and an American Airlines MD-80 were both taxiing past the control tower when their wings collided. Passengers and crew aboard both jets were evacuated through emergency chutes. 18 people were slightly injured during the evacuations. The number of victims brutalized by domestic violence in the home in this country is staggering, and that's why the American Medical Association has decided to enlist the nation's doctors in a major campaign against family violence, which the AMA describes as a national tragedy. It's one reminiscent of a scene earlier this month in nearby Hammond, Indiana. It was the last time Kim Evans' husband Jake ever abused her. Trying to escape a violent marriage, she was shotgunned to death 2 weeks ago in a Hammond, Indiana prosecutor's office by an estranged husband who then took his own life. It was a marriage with a history of domestic violence, typical of a growing national trend. which America's doctors now feel they can help remedy.
When we have more women who are killed in the home by their spouses in a 5-year period of time than men died in the Vietnam War, then we have a problem of very substantial significance. Now, these are preventable deaths. These are deaths that count just as much as one who dies from AIDS or cancer of the breast or lung cancer.
According to the AMA, more women are injured by domestic violence every year than all the muggings, rapes, and car crashes combined. And that's why doctors are now being urged to take an active role by treating more than just the consequences of family violence.
Whether it is the lack of time, whether it's the lack of getting involved with other people's feelings, afraid that we might not be able to help them, the problem is there and is perpetuating.
A key element of the AMA campaign is a set of guidelines that essentially teach America's doctors how to recognize victims of family violence, as well as prevent future violence.
I think physicians have not appreciated that when the patient said, "I fell downstairs and broke my ankle," that they've concentrated on appropriately treating the ankle and not realized that this may have been the 3rd or 4th time that this patient has had an injury in the past month.
The director of a Chicago shelter for battered women welcomes the AMA campaign as a step in the right direction.
Women who are in battering situations, who, for example, are perhaps even pregnant, who go to doctors for prenatal care, or women who enter into hospital emergency rooms because of the battering, will be, I hope, be met with a much more sensitive and responsive attitude.
Perhaps a new attitude among doctors that they are the first line of defense in combating a growing national problem that now touches 1/4 of American families. Well, a study by the AMA has found victims of domestic violence are more likely to discuss it with doctors rather than police. Animal rights activists today protested outside of the convention of the American Meat Institute being held at Chicago's McCormick Place. They're accusing the Institute of violating federal guidelines that dictate the way animals are slaughtered in meat packing houses. And we caution you that some of the following pictures are extremely graphic. Carol Davis Dillard has more.
These demonstrators say meat is murder, and they say this video proves it. Activists from People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals say this tape shows serious violations of the federal laws regulating how animals are slaughtered. It's a video the group says it made it to Pennsylvania slaughterhouses.
There are very, very few laws which protect animals in the meat trade, and the few which are there have been violated by the 2 slaughterhouses that PETA recently investigated.
And it's a tape showing activity PETA says should concern everyone.
Animal rights is just an extension of I think, social evolution. I think we're getting to the point now where it's the last great social movement that needs to be addressed. And I think we have to, in this world, promote a humane ethic, and that includes not only people but animals, because when you approve of animal abuse, it's a very, very short step to approving of abuse of humans.
According to PETA, federal law dictates that animals must be unconscious before shackling or hoisting, and the animals must be calm when delivered to the stunning areas. But the American Meat Institute says this video was obtained under questionable circumstances with PETA members posing as medical researchers and meat inspectors. The AMI says its member plants operate according to all federal laws.
Animals in meat packing plants do not die of old age, but when they die in compliance with very specific requirements enacted by Congress, enforced by the Department of Agriculture. So when they die in accordance with the Humane Slaughter Act.
And the Meat Institute adds if PETA's allegations are true, federal investigators would shut offending meat plants down.
A meat plant in the United States cannot operate unless there is a federal inspector on site, on the premises, ensuring compliance with a wide array of federal laws, including the Humane Slaughter Act. The meat inspectors in our plants have the authority to shut our plants down. That is the ultimate incentive for any business to comply.